Welcome everyone to Diabetes Canada's webinar series. My name is Farah Ismail and I will be your host for today. We are delighted that you're able to join us today for a webinar to learn about living well with diabetes and Aboriginal perspective. Now to start off, I'd like to draw your attention to our survey. It's located at the top right-hand section of your screen. In order for Diabetes Canada to better serve your needs, we kindly ask that you provide us with your input by completing the short survey towards the end of our presentation. And we thank you in advance for your input. Throughout today's presentation, you will have the opportunity to ask questions, and this can be done by simply typing in the question and answer box, which is located to the bottom right-hand section of your screen. I will be happy to answer your questions at the end of our presentation. As well, we will be displaying a few polling questions in today's presentation, and we'd love for your response. I would like everyone to know that your responses will remain completely anonymous. Also note that you're able to customize your screens. You can do so by dragging down the bottom right-hand corner of each of the webinar pods. Our presentation today will last about 30 to 40 minutes in length, and we'll have another 10 to 15 minutes at the end for questions. I do want to let everyone know that our presentation today is recorded and will be posted on the Diabetes Canada website in the coming weeks. So now I'd like to welcome our speaker, Kathleen Gibson, and thank her for joining us today. But before turning it over to Kathleen, I'd like to give you a brief introduction. Kathleen is a registered dietitian and certified diabetes educator with First Nations and Inuit Health Branch in Alberta region. Kathleen has had a strong interest in living well with diabetes since her own diagnosis with type 1 diabetes in 1994. Professionally, she has worked with the First Nation communities in Alberta on diabetes and food security issues since 2004. For more information on Kathleen, please read the speaker bio section, and that's located to the left of your screen. So without further ado, I present to you Kathleen Gibson.
Hello, everyone. Before we begin, I would just like to acknowledge that I am in Treaty 6 territory, a traditional meeting ground, gathering place, and traveling route of the Cree, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Métis, Dene, and Nakota Sioux. I acknowledge all of the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit whose footsteps have marked these lands for centuries. So today we're going to be talking about living well with diabetes from an Aboriginal perspective. And our objectives are understanding what diabetes is, understanding the seriousness of diabetes, learning about healthy food choices, and some of the benefits of active living. I just want to be clear that this presentation is not meant to address individual care and treatment questions. If you have those kind of questions about your personal care, you should probably speak to your healthcare team at your earliest chance. So we're going to move into some polling questions, and so I'm going to give you a couple of seconds to fill out the poll on your computer, and then we will do the answer. So our first polling question is, eating too much sugar can cause diabetes. Is this true or is this false? Okay, so we have 2/3 thinking that it's false and 1/3 thinking that it's true. So eating too much sugar is not the cause of diabetes. So it's important for you to know that there's no single cause for diabetes. It's a very complicated condition, and so many factors play a role. But eating a balanced diet and limiting the amount of sugars can certainly help you manage your diabetes or prevent diabetes. But sugar is not the cause. So our next polling question is, type 2 diabetes only happens in older people. Is this true or is this false? Give you a couple of seconds. Oh, that's awesome. Everybody got the right answer. So the next one is, insulin is not a cure for diabetes. Is this true or is this false? True, that is correct. Sometimes those negative questions are challenging, but insulin is not a cure for diabetes. Insulin is a way of managing and treating diabetes, but it is not a cure. Currently, there is no cure for diabetes. So throughout today's presentation, we're going to be talking about Joanne. Sometimes it's helpful to talk about diabetes and have a person in mind. And so Joanne is going to help us learn more about diabetes today. So just so you know, Joanne is a fictional person, but her story is very similar to stories told by many people at risk for diabetes. So Joanne is a 26-year-old First Nations woman. She's a new mother. She had gestational diabetes during her pregnancy, and she had her first child less than a year ago. So she's had some trouble losing her baby weight and has even gained a few more pounds since giving birth. She's concerned about her health and decides to have a checkup at the nursing station. So today we're going to learn about diabetes right along with Joanne. So who has diabetes? Currently, 11 million Canadians have a diagnosis of diabetes or prediabetes. And someone in Canada is diagnosed every 3 minutes. So during this hour-long presentation, there could be up to 20 Canadians diagnosed. In Aboriginal populations, First Nations people have diabetes at a rate that is 3 to 5 times the national average. Métis people have a rate of diabetes that is more than twice the national average. And Inuit people, there may be 2 to 3 times more people than are currently diagnosed, and they used to have a rate that is less than the national average, but it has increased to be the national average. So diabetes is increasing all across Canada, not just in Aboriginal people, but Aboriginal people have more risk for diabetes. So diabetes then, if we think about it, before 1940, diabetes was not really a concern for Aboriginal people. In earlier times, people needed to be more active and ate more traditional foods, and a lot of these were ways to survive. They were ways to survive. And there was a more natural balance between food and activity. People would hunt and fish and trap and gather food more often than what happens now, and the foods from the land made up the bulk of the diet. If we think about the lifestyle now, there's less hunting, fishing, trapping, and gathering in many First Nations communities. Some communities find the animals are no longer in their neighborhood, and it can be very costly to do hunting, and that can be a barrier for people. More non-traditional foods or market foods are being consumed. Sometimes there are no stores close to where First Nations communities are, and so they're reliant on gas bars and convenience stores more than regular grocery stores. And this leads to a less balance between food and activity. And then in amongst all of this, we have intergenerational trauma, which is the longstanding impact of colonization in residential schools, which very negatively impacted culture and tradition, healthy behaviors, and just overall health of Indigenous people across Canada. So let's learn a little bit more about Joanne. So she goes to her appointment at the nursing station, and the nurse tells her she's at high risk for type 2 diabetes. Joanne's grandmother had diabetes, and she experienced some complications, including blindness, and she died of a stroke at age 62. Joanne's mother also has diabetes, but manages her diabetes well. And so Joanne would like more information so that she can stay healthy and be more like her mother and less like her grandmother in terms of diabetes. So since we're talking about diabetes, we should really figure out what it is. Our bodies get energy by making sugar from the foods we eat. And our body needs that energy in order to work and to think and to play. So when sugar comes from foods like starchy foods like bannock, from fruit, from milk, from juice, and also sugar-sweetened foods and drinks, like what we talked about earlier with the polling question. Something that's interesting, though, is our body also makes sugar in the liver, and this sugar keeps our body working between meals and when we are sleeping. Now, in order for our bodies to use this sugar for energy, we need insulin. And insulin is a natural hormone in our bodies, and it's in everybody's body, and it's needed in order to help our body use the sugar. So it's kind of like a key. If we imagine that we come home from work and we need to unlock our door, we need a key in order to do that. So in order for the sugar to get into our body's cells, insulin is like the key that opens the door. So when you have diabetes, your body has a hard time using and storing food energy. Now, your body may not make enough insulin or can't use the insulin it makes, or sometimes both of these things are happening. Without enough insulin, your blood sugar level rises too high. Now, some people say, well, is that just in diabetes? And really, when anybody eats food, their blood sugars are going to rise, but then they come back down. The problem with diabetes, they don't come back down in the same way. It's like, I don't know if any of you have had a sticky lock on your door. My mailbox lock is like this at the moment, where you have to stand just right on one foot, hold your breath, jiggle the key, and maybe you can get your mailbox open. In my case, my mailbox. And that's kind of how diabetes is. You might have lost your key, so you can't get into your house, or the lock doesn't work the same way with the key. Or sometimes both of these things happen. So that kind of explains how insulin plays a role with getting the blood sugar out of your blood into your cells. So if you have diabetes and you have high blood sugar, that can really lead to complications in your body. And we'll talk a bit about the complications in a few slides. Because the longer your blood sugars are high, the more damage that high blood sugar can cause in your body. But the good news is diabetes can be managed, and we're going to talk about management today, but there is still no cure, despite of all the good research that's happening in Canada. There are 4 main types of diabetes that we're going to cover in the next slide. There's type 2, gestational diabetes, type 1, and prediabetes. So type 2 diabetes is the most common type of diabetes. In all of the world, 90% of the people who live with diabetes have type 2. It is the most common type also among Aboriginal people. And Aboriginal people, as we talked about earlier, are at a higher risk for getting type 2 diabetes. So as a reminder, type 2 diabetes is when your body cannot make enough insulin or it does not use the insulin it makes properly. It used to be that type 2 diabetes really came on when people were older. It used to be called adult onset diabetes, but the world of diabetes is changing, and now we have children and youth being diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. This is a bit scary because the longer you have diabetes, the more complications you potentially will get. So if you are diagnosed in childhood, it means you have many, many more years of a diabetes diagnosis than if you're diagnosed as an adult. So the management strategies for type 2 diabetes include healthy food choices and active living, checking your blood sugar, and so often medication is required, and that can be pills and or insulin, which means you might just be on pills, you might just be on insulin, or you might be on both pills and insulin, depending on how your diabetes works in your body. It's important to know that different people need different treatments. You may have a sister with diabetes who has a very different treatment plan than yourself, and that's okay because everybody's body is unique. It's good to remember that type 2 diabetes can be delayed or prevented, and how you delay or prevent is what we're going to be talking about, but it's really the same as the top two choices here, healthy food choices and active living. They kind of are the level ground. It's the foundation or the level ground that you want to build your house upon. So adapting those or adopting healthy food choices and active living will help you in a lot of ways. The next type of diabetes we're going to talk about is gestational diabetes. Now, this is a type of diabetes that only happens during pregnancy. And Aboriginal women are 2 to 3 times more likely to have gestational diabetes during pregnancy than non-Aboriginal women. It cannot be prevented. It's just how the body reacts to being pregnant and some of the impact of hormone levels that a woman's body may not adapt to pregnancy as well as some others. So having gestational diabetes increases the risk of developing diabetes later in life for both the mother and the child. After pregnancy, a woman's blood sugars usually return to normal. But it's really important to get checked 6 months after you give birth to make sure that everything has gone back to normal, so that if you need to get management and care, you can. So the best way to manage gestational diabetes is by improving your diet and being more active. So we're going to hear those things quite a bit throughout this presentation. Type 1 diabetes, that's the type of diabetes I have, and it's very rare among Aboriginal people. The body produces little or no insulin, and it's most often diagnosed in children or young adults. But I was 27 when I was diagnosed, so even type 1 diabetes has changed quite a bit through time. People with type 1 diabetes must take insulin in order to survive. And type 1 diabetes cannot be prevented. It's not sure why people develop type 1 diabetes. It's a big area of research. The final type of diabetes is called prediabetes, and this is an actual condition that you get diagnosed with. And it occurs when your blood sugar levels are higher than normal, but lower than what a diagnosis of diabetes would be. So you're kind of in this in-between place. It used to be called borderline, but it isn't a borderline. It's an actual condition. So having prediabetes puts you at an increased risk for developing type 2 diabetes and also for developing heart disease. So the nice thing is you can manage prediabetes, and through that management, you can prevent or delay actually the progression to type 2 diabetes. It's really important to stay healthy because you don't want to get diabetes if you can avoid it. So we talk a lot about risk factors and things that put you at risk, and they fall into 2 categories. There are things you cannot change, and then there are things you can change. So some of the things you cannot change your ethnic background. You cannot change if you are Aboriginal, Asian, South Asian, Hispanic, or of African ancestry. You cannot change your age. Although there are many celebrities and the internet tells us we can look younger, we're not actually any younger. So if you are over the age of 40, it's really important to get checked, and we'll talk about that later. And if you are younger than 40, but you are Aboriginal, you might want to get checked earlier also. Having a parent or a brother or a sister with diabetes increases your risk, but you can't do anything about that. Being a woman, having had gestational diabetes, or having had a large baby. And a large baby is more than 9 pounds or more than 4 kilograms. But there are risk factors you can change. You can change your activity level so that you move from not enough activity to more activity. You can improve your eating habits. If you are carrying extra weight, you can change that to reduce your weight by 5%, and that can help your diabetes risk. If you have high blood pressure or high cholesterol, you can also manage your high blood pressure and high cholesterol, which help reduce your risk of diabetes. So there are signs and symptoms of diabetes. People might be often thirsty, drinking a lot of fluid. If you drink a lot of fluid, chances are you're going to pee a lot. If you have unexplained weight change, if your weight goes up or your weight goes down and you don't know why, that can be a sign and a symptom. If you are very tired, you have little energy, if you have blurred vision, if you have trouble getting or keeping an erection, if you have more infections than usual and your cuts and your bruises heal slowly, and if you have tingling or numbness in your hands and feet. Any one of these or multiples of these are signs and symptoms that your body is beginning to have a hard time. But it's interesting to note that many people with type 2 diabetes have no symptoms. So how will you know? Well, if you're experiencing any of those symptoms or more than one of those symptoms, it's really important to get checked for diabetes. If you don't have any symptoms, but you are Aboriginal and maybe you have a parent with diabetes and maybe you're over the age of 40, you still want to get checked for diabetes because, as we know, if you don't have any symptoms, there isn't going to be anything telling you, and a blood test is going to tell you. So I encourage you all to talk to your healthcare team if you want to know or you want to get checked. So diabetes is serious. It's really important to know if you have diabetes as early as possible so that you can prevent the complications. So the complications of diabetes really come from nerve damage and from damage to the small and the large blood vessels. So usually some of the complications, the complications relate to heart problems, high blood pressure, stroke, lower leg amputation, kidney disease, blindness, trouble with your teeth and gums, trouble getting or maintaining erection, or if you're a woman, trouble with vaginal dryness and discomfort, trouble with mental health. Now, I just want to make it clear that uncontrolled diabetes can lead to the complications. If your diabetes is in good control, you really reduce your risk of developing complications. So let's talk a little bit more about Joanne. So the nurse told her that she's at high risk for getting type 2 diabetes. So she recognizes she can't do anything about being Aboriginal, that she had gestational diabetes, that her mother and her grandmother have had diabetes also. But she also recognizes there are many risk factors that she can change. So what can we do? We can take care of our whole body, our mind, and our spirit, because being well helps you, your family, and your community. We're going to talk about making healthier food choices and being more active. We've already talked that those are kind of like the foundation or the level ground we want to walk on. We're going to talk about reducing our stress. You can manage your weight. And it's really important to know that small changes can make a big difference. I don't want anyone to think that they have to stand on their head in order to manage their diabetes or to prevent diabetes. It really is about small changes and thinking about healthy eating and active living that can make a big difference for people. So a really good tool to look at for healthier food choices is Eating Well with Canada's Food Guide. And the pictures here show the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis version of Canada's Food Guide. And you can get that at the Healthy Canadians website, so healthycanadians.ca. And it really helps you understand what to eat and how much you eat. So Eating Well with Canada's Food Guide helps you know the 4 food groups. So we have vegetables and fruit, we have grain products, we have milk and alternatives, and we have meat and alternatives. Now, different people need different amounts of food. The amount of food you need every day depends on your age, your body size, your activity level, whether you're male or female, and whether you're pregnant or breastfeeding. And so looking at Canada's Food Guide can help you know how many food guide servings you need in a day for your age and your gender. We're going to go through the 4 food groups. And I just want to remind people that a food guide serving is not the same as the amount of food you might actually eat. Your personal serving sizes might be bigger than what a food guide serving is, and that's okay. This is just to help you understand the number of food guide servings. So with vegetables and fruit, the 7 to 10 servings a day applies to adults. Women usually need 7 to 8, and men usually need 7 to 10. So examples are things like carrots, turnips, salad greens, cabbage, berries, bananas, apples, oranges, peppers, everything you can think of in the produce section of your grocery store, if you have a grocery store. So one food guide serving is 125 mils or half a cup of fresh, frozen, or canned vegetables, 250 mils or 1 cup of salad, 1 medium-sized whole fruit, and 125 mils or half a cup of frozen or canned unsweetened fruit. So for vegetables, as much as you can hold in both hands really applies to a later slide with the split plate. And a piece of fruit is really the amount the size of your fist. So at the ends of your arms, you have these wonderful measuring tools that were designed just for you as an individual. Our hands, they are wonderful for helping us understand food serving sizes. So if you gently cup your hand, if you look what fills to your first knuckle, that is about half a cup of, say, canned vegetables or cut up fruit. So I want you to think about that's half a cup. So it's very easy to get that amount of food several times throughout the day. When we're talking about grain products, we're talking about 6 to 8 servings per day. And the types of examples are whole grain bread, bannock, pasta, rice, pita bread, hot cereal, cold cereal, everything that's made out of a grain product. Now, one food guide serving would be a slice of whole grain bread, usually the type of sliced bread that you get at the grocery store. Again, a half a cup or 125 mils of cooked pasta or rice. 1 piece of bannock, that weighs 35 grams, but that's usually a 2-inch by 2-inch by 1-inch piece. So for those of you that love your bannock, that's a much smaller piece than usually what bannock is cut into. 175 mils or 3/4 of a cup of cooked hot cereal. So it's a good idea to make at least half of your grain products whole grain each day. And so things like oatmeal is a great source of whole grain bread. You can buy whole grain pasta, brown rice. Those are some great examples. Now I want you to think about if you make a fist is about 1 cup. So that would be 2 food guide servings of grain products. Are you surprised by the amount of pasta or rice that fits in 1 cup? Usually people eat a lot more than 1 fistful. So with milk and alternatives, we're looking at 2 to 4 servings per day. Fluid milk, powdered milk, fortified soy beverage, cheese, yogurt. Those are all things that are under the milk and alternatives group. So 1 food guide serving is 1 cup or 250 mils of fluid milk or mixed powdered milk, 250 mils or 1 cup of fortified soy beverage, 170 grams or 3/4 of a cup of yogurt, and 50 grams or 1.5 ounces of cheese. If you don't drink milk, there are other food sources of calcium, and they appear on the back page of the First Nations Inuit Métis Food Guide, and they include things like wild plants, seaweed, bannock made with baking powder, fish with bones like canned salmon, nuts, shellfish, and beans like kidney beans, white beans. And if you think about, we're going back to look at our hands, if you put your 2 thumbs and you stack them on top of each other, that's about the size of 50 grams of cheese. Our last food group is meat and alternatives. And these are our protein-based foods, and we are looking to get 2 to 3 servings per day. Now these include things like traditional meat, wild game, fish, eggs, beans, nuts. And 1 food guide serving is 75 grams, which is 2.5 ounces, or 125 mils, which again is that 1/2 cup, traditional meats and wild game, or lean meat, poultry, and fish, or 2 eggs is 1 serving, or 175 mils, or 3/4 of a cup of cooked beans. And the recommendation is to try plant-based protein choices more often, like the beans or lentils. They are a low-cost, high-protein alternative to meat, and they have a long shelf life. So we'll talk a little bit about fat. So we don't want a lot of fat, but we do need some fat in our diet. So we want to limit the high fat and greasy foods. We also want to limit butter, oil, and margarine. And I want you to notice that limit does not mean avoid. We want to avoid trans fats because we know that they are really hard on our heart. And it's really helpful to read food labels to look at the amount of fat in food. You can compare food labels and see which might be the best choice. And if you read the ingredient list, you can look for words like lard, oil, shortening, butter, and all of those things mean fat. Another tool to make healthier food choices is a resource called Just the Basics. And there is a link at the end of the presentation how to get to that, and there's also a resource piece, a resource box, I believe, on your view where some of these resources are. So the Just the Basics gives you more information about healthy living and diabetes. And the Aboriginal versions are available in several Indigenous languages. And it really helps you to know when to eat, what to eat, and how much to eat. And these are sort of the basics for healthy eating for anybody, but really can help people who are living with diabetes or want to prevent diabetes. So how much is enough? So I don't know if any of you will have seen this split plate before, but I know that it's been used a lot in the world of diabetes. And it's a way of managing your portions. So half of your plate is vegetables, at least 2 kinds. A quarter of your plate is the starchy foods, like the grain products and potatoes, and corn goes there too. And 1/4 of your plate is where the meat and alternatives or the protein foods go. Now this is where, if you hold your 2 hands together, that kind of would fill half a plate of vegetables. If you made a fist or 2/5, that kind of fits in the grain and starches. And if you did the palm of your hand without any fingers or your thumbs, that kind of is a serving size within the meat and alternatives, or again, that fits. If you have a glass of low-fat milk and a piece of fruit, you have a really balanced meal. You have all 4 food groups represented. Another good idea to understand how much is enough is to eat slowly and stop when you are finished. Often we're really rushed when we eat, so we don't pay attention to our body signals that tell us, I am full. So that might be something to try. And I don't know where the slide is gone. I'll try again. Oops, I'm going to just go back. All right, so is there anything else we can do? Well, there's the snacks. Some people need to have snacks and some people do not. That's something you will figure out as you go along. But if we're talking about snacks, we want to limit the sugary and sweet snacks. We want to limit the high-fat and greasy snacks. We want to make sure that the snacks we do have are good tasting, but that they're healthy and they're readily available for us. And it's really good to think about having a snack be at least 2 food groups. Another helpful thing is if you're thirsty, drink water. And you can plan ahead so that you have the food you need if you will be away from home, especially when you have diabetes. If you want to reduce the sugary and sweet snacks, having your own snacks on hand can be really helpful. I travel a lot with my job, and I always carry food because that way I know that I've got the food I need to manage my diabetes, no matter where I am. So we're going to talk about the benefits of active living. So we know that being active is really important, and that increasing your activity levels can reduce your risk of developing diabetes. The benefits are you have more energy. The more you move your body, the more energy you have. You will have stronger muscles and bones, which do well with you. They help you throughout your whole life. Being physically active is a great way to reduce your stress. It helps you manage your weight, and you can live a longer and healthier life. So it's really important to get active. The goal is to get at least 150 minutes of physical activity every week. And lots of people go, oh, that's a big number. But if we look at it, there's 7 days in the week. So we're really looking between 20 and 25 minutes of physical activity every day. We want some of it to be resistance exercises, which is weightlifting or moving your body, climbing stairs. You can do things with soup cans to do some light weight work. We want to start slow and build up. If you're not active now, I don't want you to think that as soon as this presentation is done, you've got to go and get 150 minutes of activity. It's making small changes that can lead to a big difference. Sit less and move more. We used to talk to elders about standing up every commercial break as a way just to move your body. And it's really important to think about starting today. What can you do differently today? So we have some more polling questions coming up, so I look forward to seeing your answers. Making healthy food choices means staying away from my favorite food. Is this true or false? Give you a few seconds. False. Awesome. I love it when people have all the answers already. This is great. The next question, you don't have to be slim to be physically fit. Is this true or false? And I went too quick. Try again. True. Lovely. That's 100%. That's true. You do not have to be slim to be physically fit. And being physically fit does not mean you're slim. You can have health at any size. You can exercise in small amounts of time and still benefit. Is this true or false? True. Nice to know that you're all listening out there. That's absolutely true. 10 minutes at a time can make a big difference. So now we're going to go back to more about Joanne. So the nurse told Joanne that small changes could make a big difference to her health. And the nurse encouraged Joanne to only pick no more than 3 things because she wanted Joanne to feel successful and Joanne wanted to feel successful. So Joanne felt that she could switch to whole wheat bread because it was right beside the white bread at the store. She felt she could drink more water, maybe not have that pop in the afternoon and go for water instead. And she could try walking with a friend. She knows that she doesn't walk very much now, and she would feel better if she was with a friend and they would walk together and support each other. So it's important to think about for yourselves out there, what small changes can you make to make your daily life healthier? So the bottom line is it's time to get serious about diabetes. Type 2 diabetes can be prevented or delayed. And it's never too late to make healthier food choices and be more active. Those are the foundation for healthy living. And today is a good day to start. It's important to know where you can get help at your health center or your nursing station. You can talk to a community health staff, your doctor, your family, and Diabetes Canada are all excellent places for you to get some information. Excuse me. It's important to think about starting with 1 or 2 small changes at a time. You want to be able to feel successful in the changes that you make, and you don't want it to be such a challenge that you're not able to keep those changes. Because being well helps you, your family, and your community. All right, so we're moving on to questions. So I'm hoping that we've got some good questions out there.
Great. Thank you so much, Kathleen. You've provided us with a very informative and great presentation with some really great insight on diabetes from an Aboriginal lens. So we thank you so much for your presentation. As Kathleen has mentioned, we will take some questions now. If anyone does come up with some additional questions after today's presentation, we will be more than happy to respond to them. So if you'd like to email those directly to us at webinars@diabetes.ca, we'll be happy to follow up with you directly. So Kathleen, with that being said, I'll start off with our first question here. Our participant has said, if my father has diabetes, will I get it regardless of maintaining a healthy lifestyle?
Oh, that is an excellent question. So, no, there's no guarantee that choosing healthy, making some healthier choices with eating well and being active, there's no guarantee that that will prevent you from getting diabetes if your father has diabetes. But what it will do is it will delay the diagnosis And it also keeps you healthier in the long run. And it's a great way to control your blood pressure, your cholesterol, your diabetes risk factors, which is one of the goals, right? You may not be able to prevent it, but you will be able to delay it and know that you're already doing the healthy behaviors that if you get diabetes, you'll be able to do really well.
Great. Thank you so much for that response. Another question. Earlier you did mention the Aboriginal version of the food guide. Is it possible to repeat the website that one can go to access that information?
Absolutely. It's healthycanadian, all one word, .ca. And that's the Health Canada sort of public website, which makes it easier to find information for Canadians. And it's the Eating Well with Canada's Food Guide, First Nations, Inuit, and Métis version.
Great. Thank you so much for that clarification, Kathleen. Our next participant has asked, would you say that fresh fruit and vegetables are healthier than frozen foods? It's difficult for my family to access fresh foods on a regular basis.
So I would say that fresh and frozen and canned are equally nutritious. And it's really hard in many communities, as you've mentioned, to access fresh vegetables and fruit year-round. So frozen and canned are a very appropriate choice and are just as healthy as fresh.
Great. Thank you so much for that clarification. One of our next participants has said, after living with gestational diabetes, once I deliver my child, should I get retested?
And the answer to that is absolutely yes. It's recommended that you get a follow-up blood test between 6 weeks and 6 months after you deliver your baby. So when you're going in for your child's immunizations, it might be a good time to talk to the nurse and say that you would like to get your follow-up check done. And that way you'll know whether or not diabetes is stuck around or whether you are back to being able to manage your life without diabetes.
Great. Thank you for that clarification, Kathleen. Our next participant is asked, what's the difference in terms of rates of diabetes for men versus women, and why might women be higher if that's the case?
Okay, so in the general population, men have higher rates of diabetes than women. But in the Aboriginal population, women have higher rates of diabetes than men, although the men are catching up, which is probably not a good thing to say. And the reason women have higher rates is likely due to gestational diabetes, because only women can get pregnant and only women have that risk for gestational diabetes. And because the gestational diabetes impacts the mother and also the child, that's probably why women have that higher rate.
Great. Thank you for that clarification. The next question, I'm not too sure if this falls within your area of expertise, but I will ask, is wild salmon a better option to choose compared to farmed salmon?
Oh, that's an excellent question. I think if we look at the core nutrition of the wild versus the farmed, they are probably comparable. They're the same, right? The same amount of protein, the same amount of nutrition. There's other factors to consider between wild and farmed, and I encourage you to read more about sort of that sustainable fishery to be able to make that decision for yourself. Sometimes it's important if all you can get is farmed salmon, and salmon is an excellent source of nutrition, particularly if you eat the canned and you get the bones, then that's going to be a healthy choice. Both are healthy choices. You have to decide from the sustainability piece what works for you and your family and your budget.
Great. Thank you for that, Kathleen. Earlier in today's presentation, you did mention potatoes, and our next participant is asking, is there a type of potato, if you're comparing perhaps a russet potato, a white potato, sweet potato, or yams, is there one of those or a couple of those that you would recommend compared to the others?
So a potato is a potato, but it isn't a potato, if that makes sense. So there are differences between the different types of potatoes, and because the sweet potato is bright orange, and it has less, it converts to less sugar in your body, the sweet potato and the yam can be healthier choices than the regular potato, but they also cost more and aren't as readily available. So it's about balancing what you have access to and what you can afford. So sweet potatoes, if you have access to them, are a healthier choice. They don't affect your blood sugars as much as, say, a russet potato.
Great. Thank you so much for that response, Kathleen. And our next participant has asked, at what age would you recommend I test my patients who are kids whose parents are living with type 2 diabetes?
So I don't have the direct answer for that, but I would encourage the participant to review the clinical practice guidelines on the Diabetes Canada website, because there's a whole section on, there's a whole chapter on children, and there's a whole chapter on Aboriginal Canadians, and the answer about when to begin testing. I know it's at a much younger age than the general population, but I don't want to say the wrong answer because I don't have the chapter right in front of me. But those guidelines are within the clinical practice guidelines of Diabetes Canada.
Great, thank you for that. And we'll take our last question here. And Kathleen, it's back to something earlier that we just spoke to around potatoes. So our participant is asking, what, if any, are the benefits of soaking white potatoes prior to cooking? I do know of someone who does this because of a renal diet. Are there any benefits to doing this?
If you need to follow a renal diet, then soaking your potatoes is very, very important because it reduces the amount of potassium in the potato. It doesn't really change how it's going to work in your body beyond potassium. I would imagine some starch will come out, but the potato will still cause your blood sugars to go up. If you have a lot of time when you're preparing food, and you like the taste of potatoes that have been soaked prior to cooking, then definitely go that route. But that really is an example of what somebody with kidney disease or following a renal diet needs to follow. If you don't have kidney disease, you don't have to follow that sort of extra step.
That's great. Thank you so much for that response, Kathleen. And folks, that does conclude our webinar for today. I'd sincerely like to thank Kathleen for speaking on behalf of Diabetes Canada. It's been an amazing learning experience. I do want to remind everyone that our webinar today has been recorded and will be made available on our website at diabetes.ca in the coming weeks. I'd also like to draw your attention to our next slide here. We have some additional resources and even an event that's coming up. So we have an Aboriginal gathering around the End Diabetes Stigma, and that'll be taking place on May the 17th in Prince Albert, Saskatchewan. So if you'd like some more information on that, please feel free to contact our Aboriginal Program Coordinator, Helen, and her email address is located there on the screen. For any other type of resources, including the ones that are located in the resource section at the bottom left-hand section of your screen at the moment, please visit our website, www.diabetes.ca, and in the search bar you can type in multicultural resources, and there will be a ton that will bounce up, pop up there, and especially the ones including the Just the Basics in all the different languages. So please be sure to check those out. We do have a Healthy Living webinar series, and that's going to begin on May the 24th and run until June the 6th. So our webinar topics are initially going to be around eating smart to manage blood glucose. Followed up by that will be around moving mindfully, and we'll end off our series on a webinar about making the most of your food dollar. So please visit our website to learn more and to register at diabetes.ca/webinars. And for those of you who are looking for any more support and resources to live well with diabetes, please feel free to call our toll-free line at 1-800-BANTING. That's 1-800-226-8464. I want to thank everyone for joining us today, and we hope you've learned or enjoyed learning with Diabetes Canada, and we look forward to your participation in the future.